Hey, all right, so I'm here at the Kentwood Apartments in Napa, and I tell you a lot of these are stories stemming back from when I was 4 years old. That was the first time that Child Welfare Services in Napa was involved. That was over on Marshall Avenue. I went to Shear Elementary School. No, excuse me, Phillips. And that's where that first incident happened. There was the second incident in American Canyon, which I explained to y'all when we lived on Elliott Drive. And I'll dip further into that, but I wanted to get into the third and the final time that Child Welfare Services failed me here in Napa. So, look, this is, when I tell you the story, there was a married couple here. A guy was in the Navy, and his wife, I can't remember what she did. But I lived in that apartment, that apartment right there. See that window? They were sitting right here, right where that umbrella is, and that was the apartment. The kitchen's right in there, and I was cooking an egg. And that was one of their pet peeves that they used to like to beat the crap out of us for, is if you use the good scissors, or if you pulled ice cubes out and you didn't refill the thing, which I know is kind of a jerk move, but not enough to really beat the dog smack out of a kid. And also if you drank the Kool-Aid or the tea and you didn't make a whole new picture. So like I said, I lived in these apartments. There's a window right there. I was cooking an egg, and I put this spatula in the pan to do something. And my stepdad, he straight out hit me with a full closed fist, cold cocked me from behind. I was 11 or 12, and that couple was sitting right here, and they saw it, and they called Child Protective Services. So that was third and final time that Child Welfare Services in Napa had a chance to do something, because they'd already warned my mother when they gave us back to her in American Canyon. So it was just like a toothless tiger that they kept making these threats, and they never did anything. And she was a psychiatric technician, so she had all the gift of gab and all the smooth talk and told them all the things that they wanted to hear, but they failed to protect me. So I had to make a choice at that point. And every day we had to do the chores, had to make their bed and everything. So I knew where they kept their firearm. And so a 12-year-old kid had to make a choice to either take human life, because I could have just blew this fool's brains out of his nostril cavity, because I was just tired of all the abuse, and I was tired of the lack of protection from Child Welfare Services in Napa, because they just, like I said, they just kept giving us back, after everything and all the bullshit threats and everything to take us away. They didn't do it. They just kept giving me back to my abusers. So the choice came to me at that point, because that was after they gave me back. It was just like, okay, nobody's gonna protect me, so I gotta protect myself, or I could run away from home. And so that's what I did. I got all my stuff. I packed all my clothes. I packed a suitcase full of tuna, one little suitcase full of toilet paper, a tent, blankets, and I took a kitchen knife from the kitchen. And I planned it out. And when you're gonna run away from home, like run away from home for real, like you're very apprehensive. There's a lot of tension, a lot of stress. It's very, there's an X factor and an unknown about what's gonna happen. And I knew I had a lot of stuff there with me. So what I had done was went and got a shopping cart from Kmart back then, down the street on Sosco, and pushed it all the way up. And I had all those suitcases ready. Put the suitcases with my stuff, the tent, the tuna, the toilet paper. And then I pushed it down the street to Lincoln Avenue. I made a left, and I walked all the way deep into that residential. Once it got to a point where I couldn't push the cart anymore, I took the suitcases one by one, and I walked them up an embankment, which put me out where there was a rock outcropping. And I set up my tent right there, and that's where I stayed. So let me touch bases back with y'all, because I got to go get some people right now. But I'm going to start walking you guys through the 3 different circumstances where CPS was involved, and they could have done something, but they didn't. They gave me back to my abusers, and how that put me out into that path of having to run away and escape violence, and why it's important that a little kid at 9 years old would have to even think about suicide, let alone attempt it. Failed, fortunately, otherwise I wouldn't be here. But then again, would later have to make a decision between taking human life or running away from home and living out on the streets. which I did. And that running away still catapulted me into a life of violence, because I was arrested for being a runaway, for carrying nunchakas to protect myself. That set me off into that whole path of juvenile hall, going to placements, foster care, eventually California Youth Authority, which was Gladiator School, and that having a long-term and permanent effect. And I always thought maybe it was just me, but I keep seeing more and more of these videos of other people saying they had the same problem as a result of Gladiator School. It's a form of trauma, like you become hardwired at that point, because you're 100% survival mechanism. You know what I mean? There's no mercy, there's no tolerance for weakness, and yeah. So I know I'm not alone in that sense, but I've been saying it to people for years. And then eventually, when I went to the Army, that gladiatorness carried over with me. And so there's a positiveness to that, and there's a negativeness. And I'll explain to y'all that because when I went to Gladiator School, I was fortunate enough to go to the LEAD program, which was a military style program, which was helpful for me when I got to the Army. The part that was negative was the gladiator part of it, because yeah, I'm quick to get them up. And I'll walk you guys through those stories, tell you everything that happened at Fort Benning, Georgia, Germany when I got there. This story, it's a one heck of a narrative, man. But I'm not throwing extras on it. I'm telling y'all what happened. And for those of y'all that were there and that know, I mean, there's no hyperbole. I'm not embellishing nothing. I'm just telling y'all what happened. So I'm gonna walk you through the story, and then it's gonna get, as we get closer and closer, it'll get to what's going on here in Napa, and how everything in the past makes things more abhorrent with what they're doing here. I looked it up. I got the paperwork right here. 4 years. I got it from the California Rules of Court and everything on bigamy and annulments and everything. So fortunately, I went back to the library to print that out, and I stumbled upon something that says 180 days. I don't think 180 days has passed, so I can request for Robert Stamps to review his decision, and if not, then I can file an appeal. But I got to move fast. I don't think I'm within the scope of time to request the court reconsider them setting aside my request for a default, because I was eligible for one, because the respondent, she didn't even respond for 10 months. And that's the rules of the court. And they said they like to decide based on the merits of the case. Well, that's a rule set forward for a reason. You know, it's a protection measure for one party or both parties or the whole process. No different than sanctions are put in place for a reason. It's to protect the process and to protect both sides. So when those are set aside, and then you get a commissioner that utilizes his judicial powers to sit there and undo a crime committed by these people, they're in here committing perjury, committing another crime to him, to his face, and making a mockery of this courtroom. And yet he set aside their, he approves their annulment, which was it was a crime. At the end of a crime spree of these two people committed together years before, and them coming together to try to commit perjury in courtroom 6, in his courtroom, yet he still had the feeling or the ruling that there's no statute of limitation on bigamy and the annulment, which I presented my case that there is no statute of limitation. However, once you're aware, there's 4 years to file. That's what the attorneys told me. That's what the research led me to. So I was kind of taken aback, but I was going through all this other stuff. I don't have the money. I reached out to an appeals attorney. They said it's like $20,000. There are other options that you're supposed to exercise first before an appeal, which is to request that the court reconsider. So now I have to file not one, but 2 of those. And I'll explain to you why I have to do 2 of them. And keep in mind, I'm at work right now. I'm on the way. I'm working. As I'm doing this, I'm working. I got to sit there and go deviate from work and making money and going over and doing this research and printing this out and filing these motions because I don't have an attorney. And that's where the request for the court to reconsider will come into play with the most recent ruling and why it's relevant. What are these people doing on the side of the road? It's strange.